Are you ready?
Are you ready?
For a podcast hosted by George T.
Who the hell are you?
I am the movie geek.
Who are you?
I am the movie geek.
You are such a geek.
Thank you.
And now, on with the show.
It's time!
It's showtime.
It's showtime. Here we go.
Welcome into the Movie Geek Podcast. As always, I'm your host, George T. And we've got a lot of news and just a couple of reviews, but not of movies, of documentaries that I saw. If you are a sports documentary, well, actually, one of the documentary, the other one is the episodic episodes of a show called Clipped, which is about the true story of the LA Clippers debacle with their owner. So sit back and relax for this one. But we'll go right to the box office for the weekend of July 4th. So we had only one big movie that came out, which was Despicable Me 4. And it conquered the box office with a total of $75 million, beating out, after 3 straight weeks, Inside Out 2, which pulled in a $30 million share. So again, it's doing some amazing work. So the theme of this is basically children's movies are ruling right now, and that's good. That's good. That means families are going to the movies. The third place movie was one that I just reviewed and have dropped, A Quiet Place Day 1, which made $21 million. Now, this is kind of strange because, like we did with Kinds of Kindness, Maxine was also in theaters a week early. It was played in more theaters, but it's not a nationwide opening, but it did finish 4th at $6.7 million. So not bad for a limited access movie. This one is in theaters fully this weekend, along with Fly Me to the Moon. So those are the two movies for this weekend. Bad Boys Ride or Die, which I did a review on previously, was 4th the week before and finished at number 5 at $6.5 million. Horizon fell out of the top 5, but it is in 6th place at 5.4. So it did not do terribly, but I know it's been a debacle for Kevin Costner because, again, everybody says it's a flop. Well, I don't know. I will see the movie at some point when the second one comes out, but, people just don't give him enough credit. So, the Bike Riders, which I also did a review of, finished 9th at 1.3. Kinds of Kindness not doing so well. Maybe it's just too limited because, again, the number of screens it's on, even though it was wider opened, didn't do more than 1 million. Although I did hear it wasn't as good as Poor Things, but maybe that has something to do with it. Who knows? And as I said, 2 movies are fully into the theaters this week. Fly Me to the Moon, about the so-called landing on the moon, might have been faked, and obviously Maxine. So that is your box office for this weekend. Next weekend will be exciting because that will be Twisters weekend, and then 2 weekends from now, I believe, or did I screw that up? I think I might have screwed it up. I don't know. But it will be Deadpool and Wolverine. So, but we'll get to that afterwards. So let's get to the news. Now, I had several different news items come through, and I wrote some down, but I've saved all the sequel ones for another podcast episode, so I won't really go into that many details, but we do have an update on Ben Affleck and Matt Damon starring in a Netflix thriller. It is called R.I.P. So this is the newest creation from their movie company. Air was out a couple of years ago, the Michael Jordan story. That was really, really good. So I'm expecting these guys to do some really good work in this one. This is a Netflix movie, which I believe is coming out in August. There is a lot of movies coming out in August, and we'll get through all of these right now. So, Jackpot is a movie that is going to be on Prime in August 15th. It stars Awkwafina and John Cena. So, this is another one of these comedy movies, but it's more on the serious side. We have details on this film, which the film is set in 2030. It is a grand lottery competition set in LA. So Awkwafina's character, Katie, wins a ticket for this $1 billion prize. Here's the catch, though, on this grand competition. She needs to survive long enough to cash in the check or the ticket. So she could be killed or robbed, whatever. And obviously, this is where John Cena's character comes in, named Noel, has to basically get her to safety. And they wind up splitting some of the billions afterwards. So it looks interesting from what I've seen of the trailer. So it'll definitely be one to catch on Prime. And John Cena has been doing a lot of movies. He's been doing a lot of things. Obviously, if you followed Cena, he's a wrestler, and he announced this past weekend that he will be retiring in 2025 from wrestling so he can focus on his movie career. Right now, he is in the midst of filming, Peacemaker Season 2. Peacemaker is a DC product. That's all I want to say about that. Just, wow. Okay. Another piece of news, a movie called Afraid, and this one with a poster, the AI in Afraid is highlighted and capitalized. So this one is coming out on August 30th. It is from Blumhouse, so this will be probably a good thriller horror type movie. And the premise of this movie is a digital family assistant called AIA. She does everything for them, including making sure that they are safe from everyone. So she is probably like Megan. So again, we have gone a little crazy with this AI stuff or this robotic stuff. And look, Megan started out okay, and it just went downhill. So I'm not high on this movie. So we'll see about the we'll see. I have to see the trailer for it. We'll see it eventually, but again, it's not one of these movies that I'm jumping on, but Blumhouse, it will be worth probably a watch. Might not be good, but it might be. Who knows? Some new stuff about the Alien TV series. So a lot of people have been curious about time frame and whatnot, and so this is a prequel series, and the parameters of this will expand on the franchise's look at the Weyland and Yucatan corporations. So obviously they were featured highly in the movies, including Alien vs. Predator. So there is the opportunity to bring in Alien vs. Predator canon, which could also explain why they are so knowledgeable about these aliens. Because again, if you want to look all the way back to the original Alien movie, they were sent out to LB-426 on the company's order. So the company already knew about these creatures. They had protocols in place. They wanted to break them because of the information that they knew of, and obviously Ripley survives. Then fast forward to Aliens, where Ripley is found. She's been gone for 58 years, 59 years, and now they've built a colony on LB-426 because they know that these creatures exist. Obviously, they knew about this stuff. Then when Prometheus came out, Ridley Scott went back to that original process where Weyland and his android knew about these creatures. He sent them out to explore this area. He went with them, or one of the company guys went with them. And obviously you know the rest of the history. So this should be an interesting show, and I am looking forward to it. And I know I sound hypocritical about things. And again, when we get to the sequel episode coming up later on, it's going to be hypocritical because there are some things I'm looking forward to, and there are some things that I'm really not looking forward to, but I will see them anyway because I'm a movie geek. So, again, I can be hypocritical, but I love the Alien stuff. I've loved all of it, so I'm looking forward to this. Another piece of news, a movie called The Bride comes out in September of 2025. So this is like a Bride of Frankenstein, but it's called The Bride. Maggie Gyllenhaal is playing the bride, and Frankenstein is going to be played by Christian Bale. Again, I'm going to sound hypocritical, but we've done a lot of Frankenstein movies, haven't we? We're going to do another couple of Dracula movies coming up. Again, I'll get into that at another time, but Christian Bale, Maggie Gyllenhaal, sign me up for it because those actors, they are amazing actors. So it might be entertaining for me. I may not like the idea of having another Frankenstein movie, but you know what? Give me Maggie Gyllenhaal and Christian Bale. I think it'll be worth a watch. So September of next year. So you got a while to wait for a trailer. So we'll look for that. I'm also very excited because I've been wondering about when this movie was going to come out. So I had talked about this at the very first episode when I did my top 25 movies that I was looking forward to this year. Well, this one was put out over in Europe for a while. It is finally coming to the United States. This movie is called Mother's Instinct. This is coming out, unfortunately, the weekend of Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm still going to see this movie regardless. But obviously I will see Deadpool and Wolverine first. But I wanted to see this movie. It's called Mother's Instinct, and it stars Anne Hathaway and Jessica Chastain. Put my money right in that box, because 2 of my top 10 actresses are in this movie. It looks really good, and I mentioned it before. I will watch anything those 2 do. So I will give a full rundown when that movie comes out in a few weeks. But obviously I'll do my Deadpool and Wolverine first. But you heard it here first. Mother's Instinct coming out July 26th. So with that being said, there's not much more here. I did want to go back in time to memorable opening movies on July 4th. So there was a list that I saw of 53 movies. And I'm not going to go through all 53 movies because a lot of them were bombs and a lot of them weren't good. But I'll give you my top list of those movies. We'll start from the back end. So, did you know that 4 Spider-Man movies were dropped during July 4th weekend or week? They are in order: Spider-Man 2, which came out in 2004, my son George's favorite part trilogy was the original Sam Raimi ones. Amazing Spider-Man came out in 2012. That is the Andrew Garfield one. And then 2 of the Marvel ones, Spider-Man Homecoming 2017 and Spider-Man Far From Home 2019. I put those all together in the top 10 because, again, they were all grouped by Spider-Man. So those movies all opened then. Then you had a movie called Phenomenon in 1996. This starred John Travolta, about a man with mysterious powers. And it was a really good movie. I think it's definitely worth a watch if you've never seen it before. 1996, Phenomenon. 2000, The Patriot, with Mel Gibson and Heath Ledger, the late Heath Ledger, about the Revolutionary War. It is a very good movie. I suggest watching. Transformers, the original, with Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox, 2007. A League of Their Own, 1992. I mean, all women's baseball league. Tom Hanks, Gina Davis, ensemble cast. Awesome movie. Definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it. Apollo 13, 1995. I mean, what else can you say? Tom Hanks as the leader of the space mission, and you've got Gary Sinise and Bill Paxton. Again, ensemble cast. Also, we got Men in Black and Men in Black 2. Obviously, Will Smith, you're going to see again in this top 10. So this is the 4th spot. He did Men in Black in 1997, and then 5 years later, they did Men in Black 2, which was 2002. So, Men in Black 2 wasn't as good as Men in Black was originally, but it did open to a big number during that weekend. Well, because again, Will Smith kind of owned 4th of July. He did do one clunker, which was on the list, which was called Wild Wild West. A terrible movie. just absolutely terrible. And this was on the back of Men in Black and Independence Day, because he went Independence Day, Men in Black, and then Wild Wild West. Trust me, it is not worth a watch. If you have seen it, I'm sorry. But number 3 was Terminator 2 Judgment Day, 1991. And I probably should have put this number 2, but I didn't. You know what? I'm going to put it number 2 because number 3 should be Back to the Future, 1985. Terminator 2 was Cameron at his best. He had also done The Abyss. If you have not seen The Abyss, it is definitely worth a watch as well. Ed Harris, and just, it was, Michael Biehn was in it, about an underwater species, and it was really cool. It was Avatar before Avatar, kind of. Like, they weren't in, alien bodies, but it was about underwater creatures that were just trying to survive. And then, obviously, number 1 was Independence Day, 1996. I mean, how could that not be number 1? So, but I was curious, though, why Independence Day Resurgence was not put out on July 4th. Wow. Slap some executives across the face, why don't you? Because, well, how could you not have put that movie out on July 4th weekend? I don't know. Unless you knew it was going to be terrible, and unfortunately it was terrible. It was terrible, and I know that they kind of set up for a third movie. Thank God we haven't seen it yet. I know, here we go. George is being hypocritical again, but again, from Ashley's perspective, the book was way better than the movie. So I'm going to buy that because she's a reader. I'm not a reader. I'm a movie person. So that is your news and your reports for this week. We're going to go through 2 documentaries right now. So I saw, again, 1 documentary and 1 docuseries. So the documentary I saw was about wrestling. If you are a wrestling fan, I recommend Vice's Who Killed WCW. And WCW and WWE had the Monday Night Wars. And eventually WWE won, and WCW was out of business some years later. And obviously the wrestlers have all moved into WWE or the other, AEW, TNA, other promotions by now. But it was a very good documentary because it was good times and bad times, like everything. And if you're a wrestling fan, it's definitely worth a watch. And there's really no one person that you can actually say killed WCW, because the list of people who could have gotten blamed for it is a mile long. You could blame it on the owner, who would be Ted Turner, for not giving Eric Bischoff the luxuries that other things were given. But I don't think it was Ted Turner's fault. I think it was his underlings who really didn't want WCW. You could also point at Eric Bischoff for some of his judgments, who he trusted, storylines, that sort of thing. And eventually down the road, it was they were taking WWE writers. And, at times you would think, man, WWE just infected WCW so badly with their storyline and creative mode that it looks like they're going out of business. So again, there's so much in there. Again, the good times. WCW for 83 straight weeks beat WWF at the time. And they had to really try to keep that up for that long, and they did. They did an amazing job until a couple of bad decisions on creative part. And it backfired, and it turned the tide for WWF, which is now WWE. So it's definitely a worth watch. So while I've been watching The Acolyte, which I think has 2 more episodes to go, which has been a pretty good show, I will do my Star Wars, breakdown on another episode after The Acolyte comes out, because I got a lot to say about the Star Wars and where they're going with their plans. But anyway, so Hulu had the FX series Clipped. This is about the LA Clippers, the other so-called LA basketball team that resides in the at the time in the Forum, but now they have, what is it now? I forget what the hell the name of the building is, but they share the building with the Lakers. So the Clippers had a guy by the name of Donald Sterling who ran the team. He bought the team way back in the 80s. And he wasn't the nicest of guys. He was, as I would say, kind of critical of who his team had on it, and obviously he was kind of cheap. He was a millionaire, billionaire, had plenty of charity organizations, but as we learn in the series, he did not use a lot of that material, or he listened to the wrong people. He had figureheads like Elgin Baylor, who was a top 25, top 50 players of all time, wherever you want to slot Elgin Baylor. That was one of my dad's favorite players. He was kind of a figurehead. He put up with Donald Sterling and his antics for 20 plus years, but we all kind of realized that Donald Sterling is a racist, and this is the 2013 season where they bring in Doc Rivers, who left Boston, and he went to the Clippers to coach them, and he was promised a lot more than what he was getting in Boston, and he left Boston after going to 2 finals, winning 1, which was Banner 17, and then obviously losing to the Lakers in the other series, which brought the Lakers to championship number 16. So now he was a Clipper. He played for them back in the era of, I believe it was the late 80s. So Donald was comfortable bringing him in. Well, he was promised a lot of things, and believe me, it didn't go so well. He realized quickly that Donald was kind of out of touch, and he wasn't the best owner. And he had known this already, because a lot of people in his life kept asking him, why would he go to the Clippers? The Clippers are a cursed organization. He kept saying, well, it's not really cursed. It's got a bad owner. And people said, well, why would you want to work for him? Well, unfortunately, it's a job, and he was promised a lot of things. So, Mr. Sterling, wanted his opinion on some players. He wanted to bring in J.J. Redick because Minnesota was going to grab him from New Orleans. And he was like, Donald, we need to get this guy. He's going to be a big help to Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan. And he's like, well, okay, what do we need to do? So right before they're going to make the deal, Donald calls up and says, hey, I've heard some things about JJ, and I don't think we want him. And Doc was like, well, what have you heard? And he was like, well, he's a white guy. And you're laughing because you're like, wait a minute, why is this a bad thing? Like, I don't know. So Doc is like, well, he's a shooter and he's going to help out. We need to sign this guy. So eventually he caves and he says, okay, we'll bring in JJ. But all the while, Donald loves black players, but he doesn't like black people. Enter his personal assistant, who is of mixed race. She is Mexican and a little bit black, but she, wants to be known as Mexican and not black. So they have these conversations, and they're all being taped because the man kind of says whatever he wants to, and she kind of tries to correct him. She was not so much like a girlfriend. She was more of like a younger PR person, but given her age and his age, everybody thought, well, if she's hanging around him, she must be sleeping with him. And as we get into the series, she never did. That wasn't what her goal was. Her goal was to be a star, a big star. Instagram famous she was. But her life ambition was to be like the Kardashians. So she worked for him. She did a lot of errands for him. She gave him advice. Doc was like, what does she know? Like, you're asking me for advice and then you're trusting her? Like, what is going on with this? So they have this conversation because, the whole player control and everything else. So then later on, his assistant goes to one of the games. It goes to a Dodger game, and she runs into Magic Johnson. And her friend was like, "Oh my God, that's Magic Johnson over there." And she's like, "Yeah, Donald doesn't like Magic." And she was like, "What? The guy's like a legend. Like, why wouldn't he like him?" "Well, because he's black." And she was like, "What? I don't get it." So she takes a picture with her friend and Magic and puts it on Instagram. Well, Donald gets a hold of her, says, "Why are you putting these pictures out there? I hate it when you are around minorities." Now, granted, she is a minority because she's a mixed race. So she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't change the color of my skin." He's like, "No, you don't have to. You just can't do that. You can't put black people in your photographs. I don't like it." So again, you're like, Jesus Christ, this guy is absolutely like out of his mind. He has a team literally full of black people, but yet he absolutely hates them. It's bizarre. And eventually, his wife, who they kind of separated, but they own the team together, finds out that he had been buying her things. So again, she starts to think that, they're sleeping together. I mean, I would think the same thing if I was in her shoes. I think anybody would at that point. You've got a young, late 20 thing, maybe early 30s. I'm not sure, but I think she was probably on the 20 side. But again, her motives were to live the rich and famous. She scrolled Instagram so much and scrolled social media so much that she wanted to be a Kardashian. She took a lot of pictures and tried to get likes. And, she said, I follow all the players, but they don't follow me back. Well, players didn't like her, or they liked their owner. They played for him, but they didn't really know the extent of how bad he really was until the wife, Shelley, decides to look into the young one. Her name was V. Her dealings, because again, she thinks that they're sleeping together. So V has a new condo built paid for by Donald. So Shelley says, well, okay, we're going to play dirty. We're going to try to take it away from her. So she sues V. V starts to panic. She's like, oh my God, I don't want to lose the condo. It's so nice. Also, she was trying to adopt 2 teenage boys. I believe they were a friend of hers. She didn't have sole custody of them. I don't remember exactly, but she was trying to get them to stay with her. So she decides that she's going to drop some bombshells to stop the Sterlings from going after her. She knows that Donald will support her. Shelley is not going to. So she figured, maybe I'll just drop this one piece of audio and everything will just go away and I'll become famous. Well, it backfired on her, because ultimately this thing came out. The team knew about a tape that was dropped to TMZ. Now, for the most part, all of them thought it was kind of a sex tape, because again, when you're looking at this from an outside, you have a late 70s, I think he was 79 at the time, and I think a late 20-something, and she was with them a lot. So, safe to say, there might be an actual sex tape. So they kind of brushed it off. Well, it was a recording of that conversation where he didn't want her being around black people or bringing black people to games. And it caused an absolute avalanche. The team had to decide, and this was during a playoff run in 2013, where they were a pretty good team. They could have done a lot of more damage. They got out of the first round after this whole thing started in game 3 of the first round against the Warriors. They were also trying to decide whether they wanted to boycott until something was done by the NBA. Doc got them to take a vote, and they wanted to play. But it kind of backfired, because people were like, well, they're still going to play, for the plantation owner and whatnot. And Donald stuck to his guns and said, well, I'm not going to say anything. Does they have any proof that it's actually me? Well, it was. I mean, hard to deny it. But he just kind of went with the flow, thinking everything's going to be all right. More and more stuff came out. And Doc made a phone call to the commissioner at the time, Adam Silver, who had just taken over for David Stern. And Adam was backed into a corner because he knew what the league was looking like. He knew what the world looked like at this time in 2013. So he sent out his investigative teams and came back with a decision very quickly to bar Donald Sterling from going to any games and forcing him to sell the team within 10 days, because there were mounting pressure from not only the Clippers and the Clippers fans, but there are other teams in the playoffs at that time were thinking about boycotting because of the atrocities that were put out in the press over this. And I remember this very, very well. So finding out the little details here and there, was pretty interesting. We all know that Donald Sterling, to the bitter end, did not want to sell. His wife wound up finding a buyer. He didn't want her to sell, but he was kind of forced into it. And then he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He thought it was a plot against him to get him off the board so that she could make the decision to sell the team to Steve Ballmer, who still runs the team, but he was an owner of, or he was running Microsoft at the time, so he had billions. So he bought the team for $2.2 billion. When the Sterlings bought the Clippers, Shelley said that they bought it for just over, I think it was $105 million. I think, or it might have been less than that. I don't remember. But she made a significant profit. But she had in the contract, which I didn't know, and a lot of people didn't know, so this was kind of interesting, that she wanted to have some liberties with the team still. It was still kind of her team, but not Donald's, and she wanted special things. What wound up happening was Doc Rivers found out about this and said, well, I'm not going to coach if she has anything to do with it. Ballmer eventually got her off of that thing and kind of went away. As for V, she never became anything. And unfortunately, when you mess with the rich and your only purpose or your only goal is to become famous, it can bite you in the ass. And unfortunately for V, it did. The only thing she had left was her adopted kids. She had nothing left. She had to sell everything that she owned, and we don't know what happened to her after that. Kind of just went into oblivion. Again, Instagram famous and real famous is a whole lot different, and she found out. So again, was it worth it? No, it wasn't. But again, when you're blinded by the money, the fame, she was rubbing elbows with the rich and famous. She wanted to be so famous. And unfortunately, it backfired. So it's a good 6-part series. So it definitely, if you are a basketball fan, and even if you remember the whole thing that went down in 2013, is definitely worth a watch on Hulu. So those are my 2 reviews for this week. I will have more episodes coming out in the near future. Look for a bunch of different ones, because I've got some stuff working right now. I'm still trying to figure out the camera situation thing for YouTube. It's been a hassle, but you can still listen to it on YouTube. You just can't see my pretty face. I can't say that with a straight face. But anyway, so with that being said, this week's episode is done, and I will see you at the movies.
See you next time. Bye.
Waiting for you. Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Hasta la vista, baby.
That's all, folks.